You're listening to the top cheating audio stories. Enjoy your listening experience. I never expected to find myself typing this, spilling my life out to strangers on the internet. To be honest, I'm still in shock that things have come to this. I always thought my life was normal, predictable even. I had a good job, a happy family, or at least I thought I did. Now, I'm not so sure. I didn't plan to tell anyone, but keeping it all inside is making me lose sleep. So here I am, posting this, still not fully able to grasp how everything unraveled. My name is Ethan. I'm 34 years old, and I've been working as a construction manager for over a decade. It's not glamorous work, but it pays well, and it's honest. I manage a crew, oversee projects, deal with subcontractors, stuff that keeps me busy from dawn until well after sundown most days. But I've never minded the long hours, not really. It's all been for my family, for Samantha and Lucy. I've always been a simple guy in that sense. Work hard, take care of the people who depend on you. Samantha, my wife, is 29. She's beautiful in that effortless way, like she never has to try. We met through mutual friends, and everything just clicked. She was a high school teacher before Lucy was born, but after that, she became a stay-at-home mom. That was something we both agreed on. She wanted to be there for our daughter, and with my income, we could afford it. Lucy is 5, and she's the light of my life. She's one of those kids who seems to notice everything, Always asking questions, always pointing things out. Smart, funny, and way too observant for her own good. I work long hours, but every night, no matter how tired I am, I make it a point to tuck her in and read her a story. We live in a small town in Ohio, nothing special about it. We've got a few parks, a diner where most of the locals hang out, and a quiet street where we've rented a house for the last 2 years. It's not a mansion, but it's home. Our neighbor, Kyle, is my best friend from high school. He's a firefighter, lives alone, and has been single ever since I can remember. We grew up together, so it's easy having him nearby, someone familiar. For the last few months, though, things have fell off. Samantha used to be so warm, so present, and now, it's like she's fading away from me. At first, I thought it was just the usual stress of parenthood. We've both been tired, and having a 5-year-old to keep up with is no easy task. But then it started getting more noticeable, small things at first. Like, she stopped greeting me at the door when I came home from work. She used to run up to me, give me a kiss, ask about my day. Now, I'm lucky if I get a nod while she's scrolling through her phone. She's always on that damn phone these days. I've caught her typing away at all hours, texting God knows who. I asked her about it once, just casually. Who are you talking to all the time? And she brushed it off, saying it was the other moms from Lucy's daycare, that they had a group chat. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She had no reason to lie, or so I thought. Another thing, our intimacy or lack of it. She used to be affectionate. Now, every night, she's too tired or not in the mood. I didn't push it. I'm not that kind of guy. But it got to the point where I started to wonder if maybe something else was going on. I dismissed it though. Marriage goes through phases, right? It's not always fireworks. But this phase felt like it was lasting too long. One night, I was tucking Lucy into bed, the same routine I always do. She was chatting away, the way kids do when they're avoiding sleep, telling me about her day, what she learned in preschool, the things that made her laugh. Then she said something that stopped me cold. "Daddy," she whispered, pulling her blanket up to her chin. "Mommy talks to Uncle Kyle when you're at work." At first, I didn't think much of it. I mean, Kyle's like family. He's over all the time, helping out when I'm busy, hanging out for barbecues. But something about the way Lucy said it, it gnawed at me. "What do you mean, sweetie?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. I didn't want to alarm her, didn't want to make a big deal out of nothing. She just shrugged like it was no big deal. "They talk. When you're not here." It was such an innocent comment. Lucy didn't know the weight it carried, didn't understand the doubt it planted in my head. I kissed her goodnight and walked out of her room, my mind racing. Why would Samantha be talking to Kyle when I wasn't around? Sure, they've been friends forever, but she never mentioned it. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was nothing, but it stuck with me. That night, lying in bed next to Samantha, I couldn't help but feel uneasy. She was there beside me, scrolling through her phone again, oblivious to the storm brewing in my head. I glanced over at her, the light from her screen casting shadows across her face. I wanted to ask her to just come out with it. What's going on between you and Kyle? But I held back. What if I was overreacting? What if it was just my imagination running wild? But Lucy's words kept repeating in my head. Mommy talks to Uncle Kyle when you're at work. I didn't say anything that night, but something had shifted. I started paying closer attention, watching for signs, looking for anything out of place. And the more I looked, the more I noticed that things were different. Subtle, yes, but different. Samantha was more distant than ever, more secretive, and Kyle, well, I hadn't seen much of him lately. Not like before. It wasn't long before I realized that the life I thought I had, the family I believed was solid, was slowly slipping away. And I was standing at the edge, not sure whether I should jump into the darkness to uncover the truth or stay where it felt safe, if only in my mind. But now, looking back, I wish I'd confronted it sooner. Because the truth is a monster waiting in the shadows, and it's about to tear everything apart. The next few days passed like a fog, but Lucy's innocent words never left my mind. It was the kind of thing I wanted to shrug off but couldn't. A tightness sat in my chest whenever I thought about it. Why would Samantha be talking to Kyle when I wasn't around? We were all close friends, sure, but something about the whole situation felt off now that it had been pointed out. I decided to drop by Kyle's place. I told myself it was just to say hello, maybe borrow some tools, but deep down, I needed answers, subtle ones. I didn't want to come off as paranoid or jump to conclusions. The last thing I wanted was to accuse Samantha or Kyle of something without cause. Kyle's house was just across the street, about a minute's walk. It was late afternoon, and I had finished work earlier than usual. As I walked up to the porch, I noticed Kyle's truck in the driveway, which meant he was home. I knocked on the door and waited. Kyle opened it almost immediately, still in his firefighter uniform, looking like he had just come back from a shift. "Ethan, what's up, man?" He smiled a bit too wide, but maybe I was just imagining it. "Not much. Thought I'd drop by, see if you've got a wrench I could borrow," I said, keeping it casual. "Yeah, sure, come on in." He stepped aside, and I walked in. His place was tidy, spotless, even like someone had just cleaned it. "You working on something at home?" "Yeah, just some maintenance around the place. Figured I'd pop in, see if you were around." Kyle went into the garage, grabbing a toolbox. He seemed normal, friendly, but there was something different about him, like he was holding something back. It wasn't the usual laid-back Kyle I knew. There was an edge, like he was too eager to keep things light. "So, how's Sam?" "Haven't seen her in a while," he asked, his back turned as he rummaged through the tools. "Busy with Lucy. You know how it is," I replied, carefully watching his reaction. His body stiffened for a split second, barely noticeable, before he turned around with a wrench in hand. "Yeah, kids keep you on your toes." He handed me the wrench, still smiling, but his eyes seemed to dart away for a moment, as if the mention of Samantha made him uneasy. I didn't push it further. "Thanks. I'll bring this back when I'm done." "No rush." He clapped me on the shoulder a little too firmly. "See you around, man." I left his house, feeling more confused than ever. Kyle had been overly friendly, which wasn't like him. He wasn't the type to act that way. He was more laid back, usually cracking jokes and messing around. Now he felt tense, like he was trying to get me out of there as fast as possible. But it could have been nothing. Maybe I was overthinking everything because of what Lucy had said. I walked back across the street, trying to shake the feeling when I noticed Monica standing on her porch, leaning against the railing, watching me. She had this knowing smile on her face. Monica worked at the diner where I sometimes grabbed lunch, and she was always overly friendly. She was 26, lived across the street, and had been single for as long as I could remember. I always got the feeling she was trying to flirt with me, but I never gave it much thought. Still, something about her standing there now, smirking like that, got under my skin. "Hey, Ethan," Monica called out, her voice carrying a little too sweetly across the street. "Monica," I nodded, not in the mood for small talk, but she stepped off the porch and started walking toward me. "You borrow something from Kyle?" she asked, eyeing the wrench in my hand. "Yeah, just some tools," I replied, keeping it short. She tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing like she was sizing me up. "You two are pretty close, huh?" "Yeah, we've been friends forever. Grew up together." She gave a little laugh, almost as if there was some private joke she wasn't letting me in on. Funny, you know. I see your wife going over there a lot lately. Didn't think much of it until now. Her eyes lingered on mine, like she was waiting for a reaction. What do you mean? I asked, trying to keep my tone even. My heart started pounding in my chest. Monica shrugged, playing it off casually. Oh, just when you're at work. I've seen her heading over a couple times in the afternoons. She smiled, but there was something sly behind it, like she was enjoying this too much. My stomach dropped. Was this what Lucy had meant? I forced a smile and tried to keep my voice steady. She probably just takes Lucy over there to see Max. Kyle's always been great with her. Monica gave me a look, one eyebrow raised. Maybe, she said slowly, like she didn't believe a word of it. Just thought you should know. Anyway, I got to get back inside. Stop by the diner sometime, okay? She turned and walked back to her porch, leaving me standing there, my mind racing. Monica's words had added fuel to the fire that was already burning inside me. Could she be right? Was Samantha really going over to Kyle's when I wasn't around? And why hadn't Kyle mentioned it? I walked back into the house, trying to act normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. When I stepped inside, Samantha was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like she always was lately. "How's Kyle?" she asked without looking up. "Fine," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Just needed a wrench." She nodded but didn't ask anything else. The tension in the room was palpable, but she seemed completely unfazed. I stared at her for a long moment, trying to figure out if there was anything different about her. But she looked the same, just distant. The next day, I ran into Mrs. Jenkins, our next-door neighbor, while taking the trash out. She was an older woman, about 67, and knew everything about everyone. If something happened on our street, Mrs. Jenkins was the first to hear about it, and she loved to chat. "Morning, Ethan," she called out from her porch. "How's Samantha?" "She's good," I replied, trying to keep it short. I wasn't in the mood for one of her long-winded stories. Mrs. Jenkins leaned in a little, lowering her voice like she was about to share some secret gossip. "I've seen her walking over to Kyle's house a few times lately. Always in the afternoon, when you're at work." I froze. That was the second time in as many days that someone had mentioned Samantha going to Kyle's house. Mrs. Jenkins might have been nosy, but she wasn't the type to lie. "Oh," I tried to sound casual. Maybe she was just bringing Lucy over to see Max. Mrs. Jenkins smiled knowingly. "Maybe, but I didn't see Lucy with her." I forced a laugh, though it felt hollow. "You know how it is? Could be anything." "Could be," Mrs. Jenkins said, giving me a look that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "Just thought I'd mention it. Have a good day, Ethan." I waved as I walked back inside, but my mind was racing. This wasn't just paranoia anymore. Two different people had now told me the same thing. Samantha was going to Kyle's when I wasn't around, and she hadn't mentioned it. Why? As I closed the door behind me, I glanced at Samantha. She was in the kitchen, making Lucy lunch, moving about like everything was normal. But something was far from normal, and I was going to find out what it was. Over the next week, the tension in the house grew thicker, even though nothing was said aloud. I watched Samantha more closely, trying to pick up on any subtle signs. She went about her routines like normal, taking Lucy to daycare, cooking dinner, scrolling through her phone, always her damn phone. The more I thought about it, the more it ate away at me. The whispers from Monica and Mrs. Jenkins, the fact that Samantha was spending time at Kyle's without telling me. It was too much to ignore, but at the same time, I couldn't just accuse her without proof. What if I was wrong? What if this was all in my head? I decided I needed to start paying attention to the little things. If something was going on, there had to be clues I had missed. That's when I started searching. One evening, after Samantha and Lucy had gone to bed, I sat in our shared home office, going through some bills. I noticed one of the drawers on Samantha's side of the desk was partially open. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but the way it was left slightly ajar caught my attention. I pulled it open, not sure what I was expecting to find. Maybe nothing, maybe everything. There, buried under some old receipts and paperwork, was Samantha's old phone. I hadn't seen this phone in a couple of years. She'd upgraded, and I assumed this one had been tossed in a drawer and forgotten. But the thing that bothered me was that she'd kept it. Why keep an old phone? My mind was racing as I stared at the device. I picked it up, my hand shaking a little, and tried the passcode. Same one she used for everything. Lucy's birthday. It unlocked. The screen lit up, and I saw it still had some apps, but the most interesting part was her email. I clicked into it, scrolling through her inbox. Nothing strange at first glance, just the usual promotional junk. Then I noticed the trash folder had a lot of activity. More than I'd expect for a phone she wasn't supposed to be using. I opened the folder and started scrolling. That's when I saw it. Several emails had been deleted recently, all of them sent to an anonymous-looking address. Something generic, nothing that identified a person. The subject lines didn't give much away either, but the dates were recent. Some of these emails were only a few weeks old. Samantha had been using this old phone to communicate with someone, and she had tried to cover her tracks by deleting the emails. I opened one of them, and my stomach tightened as I read the short message. I can't today. Too risky. Tomorrow should be better. No name, no details, but the implication was clear. I opened another. Same time as last week? I'll be waiting. The messages didn't say much, but it was enough to confirm my worst fears. Samantha was meeting someone behind my back. I kept scrolling, my heart pounding, until I saw an email with an attachment. The message itself was short. This place is perfect. We won't be bothered here. My fingers hovered over the image icon. I hesitated for a moment before clicking on it. The photo loaded, and at first glance, it was blurry, like it had been taken quickly, without care. But the more I looked, the more I realized where it had been taken. My blood ran cold. The background was unmistakable. It was Kyle's backyard. The angle was off, but I recognized the wooden fence, the grill, and the small patio set he'd had since forever. And then, in the corner of the image, was a figure that looked disturbingly familiar. It was hard to tell for sure, but the shape of the body, the hair, it looked a lot like Samantha. I stared at the screen, my mind spinning. The messages, the photo, the meetings, everything pointed back to Kyle. Was he the one she'd been sneaking off to see? It made sense, considering everything I'd heard from Monica and Mrs. Jenkins, but seeing the evidence right in front of me hit like a punch to the gut. I set the phone down and leaned back in the chair, my heart still racing. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't deny what I was seeing. Samantha had been lying to me. She'd been sneaking around, and somehow Kyle was involved. But I couldn't jump to conclusions. Not yet. The emails didn't mention Kyle by name, and the photo was too blurry to be definitive. Maybe it wasn't what I thought. Maybe there was some other explanation, though I couldn't imagine what it could be. I needed more proof. Something concrete. But how? I couldn't just confront Samantha or Kyle without knowing for sure. If I went in guns blazing and was wrong, I'd destroy everything over nothing. But if I did nothing and I was right, I didn't want to think about what that meant. I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone, wondering what the hell to do next. Then I decided I needed to search for more. Samantha wasn't careful enough if she'd left her old phone lying around. There could be other places she'd slipped up. I went back to the drawer and started sifting through the papers and receipts, looking for anything that seemed out of place. After a few minutes, I found something else, a key. A small, silver key tucked away in the corner of the drawer. It didn't belong to anything in our house. I stared at it, wondering what it unlocked and where it fit into this growing puzzle. I knew I couldn't keep this to myself for long. I needed to figure out what the key was for, and I needed to confront Samantha. But not yet. Not until I was sure. And definitely not without more evidence. I put the phone back in the drawer and pocketed the key, feeling like I'd just crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Something big was happening, something that went deeper than I initially thought. And it was only a matter of time before everything blew up. I couldn't keep quiet any longer. After finding Samantha's old phone, the deleted emails, and the blurry photo of what looked like her in Kyle's backyard, my head was spinning. The key I'd found tucked away in the drawer felt like another mystery waiting to be solved, but I didn't know what it unlocked yet. All I knew was that I couldn't sit around, pretending everything was normal. The tension in the house was suffocating. Samantha had no idea I'd found anything, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she knew something was off with me. She had started watching me a little closer, asking more questions about my day, but it wasn't out of concern. It was like she was trying to figure out what I knew. I was done playing detective in the shadows. I needed to hear the truth from her. It was late, and Lucy was asleep. Samantha sat in the living room, her legs curled up on the couch, watching TV. Her phone was right beside her, like always. I walked into the room, feeling the weight of everything building up inside me. I stood there for a moment, staring at her. She must have sensed it because she muted the TV and looked up at me, raising an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" she asked, her tone casual, like nothing was wrong. I took a deep breath. "We need to talk." Her expression shifted slightly, but she kept her cool. "About what?" "About you and Kyle." There was the slightest flicker of something in her eyes. It was gone in a second, replaced with that same calm exterior. She let out a small laugh, shaking her head. "You're serious? You think something's going on with me and Kyle?" I crossed my arms, feeling my pulse quicken. "Lucy said she saw you talking to him when I'm at work. Monica and Mrs. Jenkins both said they've seen you going over there. And now I've found messages on your old phone." Her face tightened, just for a second, before she forced a smile. "Messages? Ethan, you're being paranoid." "Am I?" I snapped, louder than I intended. "Why didn't you tell me you've been over at Kyle's house when I wasn't around? What are you hiding?" Samantha's face flushed with irritation, and she sat up straighter. "I'm not hiding anything. Kyle and I are friends, Ethan. We've known him forever. Yeah, I've been over there, but it's not what you think. We got close after you started working those extra shifts. I was lonely, okay, but nothing happened." Her words felt like a slap. "Lonely? So that's your excuse?" "I'm not making excuses," she fired back, her voice rising now. "You're barely home anymore. You're always working, and when you are home, you're too tired to even talk to me. What am I supposed to do? Sit here and wait for you like some perfect little housewife? Don't try to turn this around on me," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "I've been working my ass off for this family. You could have told me you were feeling lonely. Instead, you sneak around behind my back with Kyle? That's how you handle it?" She stood up, her eyes flashing with frustration. "I didn't sneak around. I told you we're just friends. Nothing inappropriate has happened. You need to stop acting like I've done something wrong." I was about to respond when her phone vibrated on the coffee table between us. Instinctively, I grabbed it before she could, and the screen lit up with a message from an unknown number. "Had a great time today. Can't wait for the next one." My heart stopped. The room seemed to freeze for a second, the words burning into my brain. I looked up at Samantha, my face pale. She reached for the phone, her expression panicked. "Give it to me, Ethan." I didn't move. "Who the hell is this?" I demanded, holding the phone just out of her reach. "You can't explain this away, Sam. What the hell is going on?" "It's not what you think," she said quickly, her voice wavering as she tried to snatch the phone from my hand. "Just give me the phone, and I'll explain." "Explain? You're texting some random number about having a great time, and I'm supposed to believe that nothing's happening?" I could feel the blood rushing to my face. Everything I've been holding back was coming out now. "Is it Kyle? Is that why you've been going over there? You said nothing was going on? But this? You're lying to me, Sam." "It's not Kyle," she snapped, grabbing the phone out of my hand with a quick, desperate move. "He's just a friend, Ethan. The text, it's someone from my past, okay? I didn't mean for it to get this far." I stood there, stunned. Someone from her past? My mind raced, trying to make sense of her words. The room felt like it was spinning. "What do you mean? What's going on?" Samantha looked at me, her face pale now, her eyes filled with guilt. It's a guy I used to know before I met you. He reached out a few months ago. We started talking again. It was just innocent at first, but I don't know, Ethan. Things got complicated." I took a step back, the weight of her confession hitting me like a sledgehammer. This wasn't just about Kyle. This was bigger, deeper. She had been hiding so much more than I thought. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, my voice shaking. She didn't answer right away. She just looked down at her feet, like she couldn't bring herself to face me. "A few months," she whispered. "It started after we moved here. I didn't mean for it to happen. I swear I didn't." I felt like the ground was falling out from under me. The emails, the photo in Kyle's backyard, the late-night texts. it all started to make sense. But it didn't make it any easier to hear. So, what now? I asked, my voice hoarse. What am I supposed to do with this? You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around with this guy. And you want me to just, what? Pretend it didn't happen? Samantha looked up at me, tears welling up in her eyes. I never wanted to hurt you, Ethan. I swear. I'm so sorry. I know I messed up, but I didn't know how to stop. I stood there, numb, the anger bubbling just below the surface. You didn't know how to stop? You could have told me. You could have been honest with me, but you weren't. Now what? Do you even want to fix this? Or are you just waiting for me to make the decision for you? She didn't answer, and that silence said more than words ever could. The next morning, I called in sick. I needed time to clear my head, but more than that, I needed to find out the full truth. Samantha's confession the night before had rattled me. This guy from her past, the secret texts, the months of lies. But something still wasn't adding up. Why was Kyle involved? Why had I found that photo of her in his backyard? It didn't make sense for this other guy to be the only issue. After Samantha left to drop Lucy off at daycare, I decided to follow her. I wasn't proud of it, but I couldn't let this go. I had to know where she was going and what she was doing when I wasn't around. I tailed her in my truck, staying a few cars behind as she headed out of town. I expected her to go somewhere private if she was meeting this guy, but instead, she pulled into a small park on the edge of town. It was a quiet spot, one of those places you go when you don't want to be noticed. There were only a few people scattered around, mostly older couples walking their dogs. I parked a little way down the street and watched as she got out of the car, glancing around like she was nervous. Then, to my surprise, I saw Kyle walking toward her from the opposite direction. He was dressed casually, jeans and a hoodie, nothing out of the ordinary. They met near a bench by a small cluster of trees, far enough from anyone else that they couldn't be overheard. They talked for a while, and I couldn't hear what they were saying from where I sat. They weren't touching, no hand-holding, no physical contact at all, in fact, but the way they leaned in close to each other had my stomach in knots. It didn't look like some casual, friendly conversation. There was tension between them, something unspoken hanging in the air. Frustrated, I shifted in my seat, wondering what the hell I was watching. Was Kyle part of this too? Was Samantha lying again when she said he wasn't involved? I was about to get out of the truck and confront them when I heard a voice behind me. Following your wife? I whipped around to see Monica, standing on the sidewalk with a smug smile on her face. She had on a pair of oversized sunglasses and a tight jacket, like she was on her way somewhere, but had stopped just for the show. What are you doing here? I snapped, not in the mood for her games. I could ask you the same thing. She raised an eyebrow, her tone teasing. Didn't expect to see you stalking your wife. Leave it alone, Monica. I growled, trying to focus on the scene unfolding in front of me, but she stepped closer, her smile widening. You know, Ethan, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, I could help you out. I glared at her. What are you talking about? I've been watching them too, she said, her voice smooth, like she'd been holding on to this secret for a long time. Samantha's been sneaking into Kyle's house for months. I'm surprised you didn't catch on sooner. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? What do you know? Monica let out a small laugh, like she couldn't believe how naive I was. I've seen her. Every few days, she goes over to his place when you're at work. She's careful, but not that careful. And let me tell you something else, Ethan. I'm not just saying this because I'm bored. What are you getting at, Monica? I asked, feeling the weight of her words, but not wanting to believe them. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice even more. Kyle and I, we've been seeing each other for a while now. But your wife, she found out, and instead of blowing up his spot, she's been blackmailing him, forcing him to spend time with her, to keep her company. Otherwise, she'd tell me everything. For a moment, I just stared at her, completely stunned by what she was saying. It felt like everything I thought I knew had just been turned on its head. Kyle and Monica? Samantha blackmailing him? That's crazy, I muttered, shaking my head, trying to process it all. Why would she do that? Monica shrugged, her smile fading. I don't know, Ethan. Maybe she was lonely, like she told you. Maybe she needed someone else to confide in. Or maybe she just liked having power over him. She's been using Kyle's guilt to her advantage for months now. Meanwhile, She's still sneaking around with that guy from her past. It's a mess. The pieces started falling into place, and it all made my head spin. Samantha was manipulating Kyle. She knew about his affair with Monica and had been using that information to control him, while also carrying on with her own secret relationship. But that still didn't explain everything. Why had Kyle let it happen? And why hadn't he said anything to me? I don't believe you, I finally said, though my voice lacked conviction. Why would Kyle let her blackmail him? He could have come to me. Monica sighed, crossing her arms. He didn't want to ruin things with you. Kyle's guilty as hell about what he's been doing with me. He was afraid you'd find out and hate him. So, he played along with Samantha, hoping she'd get bored and leave him alone. I felt a mix of disbelief and rage boiling up inside me. Samantha had been stringing me along, lying to my face, all while manipulating Kyle. And Kyle, my best friend, hadn't said a word. I turned back toward the park where they were still talking, oblivious to the storm brewing just a few yards away. My fists clenched at my sides, every instinct telling me to march over there and confront them both. But what would that solve? Monica leaned against my truck, watching me carefully. You didn't know any of this, did you? She asked, her voice softer now. I shook my head, still reeling from everything she had just revealed. No, I didn't. She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. So, what are you going to do about it? I didn't answer right away. What was I going to do? I couldn't just storm over there and blow everything up, not without knowing the full story. But I couldn't sit back and do nothing either. I don't know yet, I muttered, my voice tight. But I'm going to get to the bottom of this. Monica gave me a sly smile, like she was pleased with my answer. Good. If you need help, you know where to find me. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, my head spinning with everything she had just dumped on me. I glanced back at Samantha and Kyle, still talking near the trees. Whatever they were discussing, I was sure it wasn't innocent. But now I knew there was more to this than I had ever imagined. Samantha was lying. Kyle was lying. And Monica, she had her own reasons for telling me all of this. I couldn't trust any of them. One thing was clear, though, I wasn't done digging. Not by a long shot. I couldn't let it go any longer. After what Monica told me, it all made sense in a way that turned my stomach. Samantha had been playing me, playing Kyle, maybe even playing this mystery man from her past. I had too many questions swirling in my head and not enough answers. I couldn't wait any longer. That evening, after I had cooled down, I went straight to Kyle's house. I wasn't going to tiptoe around it anymore. No more sneaking, no more pretending I didn't know something was off. I needed to hear it from him. Kyle was a lot of things, but he wasn't the type of guy who could lie convincingly for long. He'd crack under the weight of guilt. I knocked on his door, and within moments, Kyle opened it. He was surprised to see me, his face immediately tense, like he already knew why I was there. Ethan, hey man, what's up? His voice was casual, but the way he avoided my eyes told me everything. We need to talk, I said flatly, pushing past him into the house. You've been hiding something from me, Kyle. You and Samantha. And I'm not leaving until I hear the truth. Kyle closed the door behind me and ran a hand through his hair. He looked like a man cornered, his eyes darting around the room like he was searching for a way out. I don't know what you mean. Cut the crap. I snapped, my voice harder than I expected. I know about you and Monica. I know Samantha found out, and she's been blackmailing you. Now, tell me everything, or I swear to God, I'm done with you. Kyle froze, his face going pale. The air between us was thick, the weight of the lies finally catching up to him. He slumped into the chair by the door, rubbing his temples like his head was about to explode. All right, he muttered, barely looking at me. You're right. She found out about me and Monica months ago. I tried to keep it quiet, but she figured it out somehow. She didn't threaten to tell you. She used it against me. Made me meet up with her, hang out, act like nothing was wrong. She said if I didn't, she'd blow up my life. And I didn't want to lose your friendship, Ethan. I didn't want to lose everything. I stood there, staring at him. Why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you tell me she was doing this? Kyle's eyes finally met mine, filled with regret. Because I didn't want to be the one to tell you, man. I thought if I just played along, she'd stop. I thought she was lonely or something, just needed someone to talk to. I didn't know how far it had gone. Far. I growled. Kyle, this wasn't just some friendly catch-ups. She's been sneaking around, texting someone, having an affair. And now you're telling me you're part of this mess too. Kyle shook his head quickly. No, I swear, I never slept with her. I didn't even know she was seeing someone else. She never talked about any guy. I wasn't sure I believed him, but the anger in my chest started to burn out, leaving me with a hollow feeling. You've got to be kidding me, I muttered. So, she was using you as a cover? To hide what she was really doing? Kyle rubbed the back of his neck, clearly still trying to process the situation himself. I guess so. I didn't know she was seeing someone else, Ethan. I don't know, man. I thought it was about us, about me screwing up with Monica, but I had no idea she was hiding something even bigger. I felt like my whole world had been flipped upside down again. Samantha had been using Kyle to cover for her real affair. But with who? And why? There was no point in sticking around Kyle's any longer. I needed more answers, and I knew I wasn't going to get them from him. As I left his house, I made a decision. If I wanted the truth, I needed to go deeper. I didn't have time to wait for Samantha to come clean. I had to dig it up myself. The next morning, I hired a private investigator. I had never thought I'd go this far, but at this point, it was the only way I could get any peace of mind. If Samantha was planning something, if she was hiding something bigger, I needed to know. I handed over everything I had to the investigator. The deleted messages, the strange key I found, the timeline of when things had started to fall apart. The next few days were excruciating. I went about my normal life, trying to keep things as steady as possible for Lucy's sake. But inside, I was unraveling. Every time Samantha left the house, I wondered if she was meeting this mystery man. Every time she looked at her phone, I wondered if she was plotting something else. Then, the investigator called. "I've got some news for you, Ethan," he said, his voice serious. "It's not good." I braced myself, gripping the phone tighter. "What did you find?" "There's a bank account in Samantha's name. She's been funneling money into it for months, small amounts at first, but it's grown into a pretty sizable sum now. Looks like she's been planning something for a while. There's also a pattern of contact with someone in another city, calls, messages, everything." I felt my knees go weak. Planning what? Hard to say for sure, but the money's enough to make a clean break. I think she's getting ready to leave. Leave? Samantha was planning to leave me. Everything she had been doing, the lies, the affair, the manipulation with Kyle, it all made sense now. She had been setting herself up to walk out of our lives, start fresh with someone else. The guy from her past wasn't just some fling. He was her future, and I was just a footnote in her plan. The investigator gave me more details, but I barely heard him. I knew what I had to do. I hung up and sat in silence for a long time, staring at the wall, trying to make sense of it all. She had been building this escape route right under my nose, and I hadn't seen it until now. That evening, I confronted her. There was no yelling, no dramatic scene. Just cold, hard facts. I showed her what I knew about the money, the affair, the plan to leave. She didn't deny it. In fact, she barely reacted at all. She just stood there, staring at me like I was the one inconveniencing her. "I was going to tell you," she said quietly. I didn't know how to bring it up." "How long?" I asked, my voice flat. "How long have you been planning this?" "A year," she admitted, crossing her arms. "After we moved here, things just fell apart. I didn't want to hurt you, but I can't do this anymore." I felt a lump rise in my throat, but I swallowed it down. "So, that's it? You're just leaving? You've been lying to me, manipulating Kyle, sneaking around, and now you're just going to walk away?" Samantha looked at me, her face expressionless. "I made up my mind a long time ago. Ethan, I don't love you anymore. I'm sorry. That was it. No begging for forgiveness, no tears, no second chances." She had already decided, long before I found out. I watched as she started packing her things, moving methodically like it was just another day. By the time she was done, I felt numb. She kissed Lucy goodbye, gave me a cold glance, and walked out of our lives. Just like that. I filed for divorce the next day. I didn't bother fighting for anything but Lucy, and in the end, I got full custody. Samantha disappeared with her new life, leaving behind the wreckage of everything we had built together. I wish I could say I didn't see it coming, but the truth is I ignored the signs for too long. I didn't want to believe that someone I loved could betray me like that. Now, as I sit here, thinking about how it all ended, I know one thing for sure. Trust is fragile. And once it's broken, there's no going back. Thank you for listening to this story. Subscribe to the channel, put a like under the video, and write a comment about how you like this story.